Stories stir the soul.
Stories reveal.
And stories heal.
In this podcast, we will give you an inside look at someone who's had a life-changing breakthrough.
Real people, real stories with real breakthroughs. As a health and wellness expert and coach, and Todd as a men's mentor,
we've seen firsthand what God can do when it comes to a breakthrough. So lean in, listen well. This could be your biggest breakthrough.
Hey there, and welcome to this episode of Your Biggest Breakthrough. I'm Wendy Pett.
I'm Todd Isberner. And Wendy, sometimes I think we find ourselves in a really, really good place in life. I mean, there's lots and lots of struggles and challenges we could spend a long time talking about. But the truth is, every once in a while, we're in a place of really a good place. And we're like, God is blessing, and it's almost like a charmed life. Others look and say, man, things are going great for you.
Right. And then all too often we fool ourselves into thinking that things will always stay this way, that things will always be hunky-dory and just blessed like it is. And we get so comfortable in it that we lose perspective.
Yeah. And then, almost like to our surprise, things begin to change almost unexpectedly. And we feel like we're losing control, and the next thing we know, we're in a place of lostness and brokenness and hurt, and just don't know how to get out of it. Yeah.
Well, our guest today has experienced that, but after losing everything, he found hope and restoration. So today on the show, we have Dr. Gene Bailey, and he is currently serving as executive director for Kenneth Copeland Ministries, the Victory Channel, and executive pastor at Eagle Mountain International Church in Fort Worth, Texas. With a long history in ministry, Gene has traveled the world and experienced the power of God firsthand. Whether it was dining with kings in the Middle East, to being thrown in jail in West Africa for spreading the gospel. Oh my goodness, can't wait to hear about that. Gene has seen God truly open doors for the gospel like never before. In 2016, Revival Radio TV was born out of Gene's hunger to see and experience true revival comparable to the great moves of God in the past. His long history in media allows Gene to see the history of revival as it applies to outpourings today. And in 2020, Gene launched Flashpoint, which is a television program highlighting current events, prophecy, and politics from a biblical perspective. Currently, Flashpoint and Revival Radio TV are seen on broadcast outlets and cable systems around the world. And so we are so excited to have Gene Bailey on Your Biggest Breakthrough today.
Hey, Gene.
Welcome to the show.
Come on in, man.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Yeah, glad to be here. Yeah. Good.
So Gene, I'm looking at this bio again, and I'm thinking now, okay, so that's a charmed life right there in ministry. That's big impact. Things are going
except for the thrown in jail part.
Well, that part, that'd be a little tricky, but
right up to that.
Yeah, right up to that. Things look pretty good. But you've got a story that shows, just like for all of us, what it means to have to go through some things that you didn't want to have to go through, and to break through to the other side. So we want you to unpack your story, but I know there's some listening right now. So what's in it for me? And here's the deal. The truth is, if you are struggling right now today, Gene is going to help guide you into a place of breaking through. So what would be the first thing, Gene, you would tell somebody, and maybe the first thing that you did when you found yourself having lost everything? What's the first thing you do? Do you grab a bunch of self-help books and start to get it together? What'd you do?
Well, no. And I enjoy the self-help industry. I actually enjoy all of that. That's the sad thing. But that's man's answer. He's never going to give you the answer that you need. The key for me was realizing, point number one, it's not about me. It's just not about me, period. Wow. And that was probably the key for me to figure out. Is like, once you understand it's not about you, then you understand, okay, God, what do you want me to do? Where have I missed it? How do I refocus everything? How do I get on the straight and narrow? And I wasn't like, out robbing banks or something. It wasn't that I was so far out, it's just that I wasn't on the right track. When you learn to fly as a pilot, I remember Kenneth Copeland explaining to me this. He said, you can fly on a heading of 180. and this is 180, you're going like this. But if you're at 181, you're not that far off right here when you start. But by the time you get to your destination, you're going to be like this. You're going to have missed it by hundreds of miles, depending on how long you had to fly. So it's important to stay on the path, stay on the right path, and stay connected to God, and get in line with that. It's really very simple.
I love that answer. I mean, that is simple. It's hard, but it's simple. It's like, it's not about me.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And I love
that in your head.
Yeah. And I love that analogy, of course, from Kenneth Copeland. And I've always said that moderation kills momentum. And just that moderation of that 1 degree, right, can really kill the momentum of the track that God has for you. And so I've known you for a long time, Gene. You're a longtime friend, maybe of 15 years. And I've seen you at that place and where you are today. And it's so awesome to see God restore and to break forth so many things that is causing a ripple effect in many people's lives because of what you've been through. So I love that. But let's go to, because not everyone knows you. Let's start back with, your childhood and how your faith walk. Let's talk there. You became a Christian at age 8, right?
That's right. Vacation Bible School.
Yeah.
At the Christian Missionary Alliance Church. Yeah, we got saved there, and it was huge. As much as an 8-year-old can understand of what happened, I do remember it. I do remember coming home and telling my dad while he was outside working on a car about what had happened. And he was, well, that's great, Gene, that's great. So it was momentous for me. Yeah. At age 8. Now this is, I'm a little bit older than you, Wendy, but Todd will remember, that, in the 60s, there was the great charismatic renewal. There was like, God was showing up in a big way. It was the precursor to the Jesus movement. And so my family, we eventually got thrown out of that church because we believed God was for today. And anyway, it's a long, ugly story. But anyway,
whole nother episode.
The point there was that our family went through this great transition time. And man, God was showing up. And so I used to hate Tuesday nights as a kid because we would have a prayer meeting, this new thing called a prayer meeting at your house, and people would come. Now there's no internet, no email, no cell phone. It's word of mouth and the phone that had a really long cord. That's the only way you connected with people.
That's right.
And we had people show up at our house. The reason I hated Tuesday nights because my sister and I had to work all day, as soon as we got home from school to get the house ready for people. And tens of people would show up, people that we wouldn't know, and they'd knock on the door and I'd answer and they go, is this the place? I'm like,
what's the secret password?
Yeah, this is it. Come on in. I'm like, another one, but that was real planting in me. I got to see the power of God move in a way that was organic. And it sounds trendy term, but we didn't know how to make the move of God happen. And you really can't do that, but we didn't fabricate something. And so God just moved. And I mean, we had a prayer meeting, which was, people prayed, that it was, it cracks me up nowadays. People say we had a prayer meeting and they talk for 55 minutes and pray for 5. But we would pray. And as a kid, back then, Todd, you remember, we had to get down. It didn't count if you weren't on your knees.
Yeah.
You had to get down on your knees. You had to pray.
Catholic or not.
So Catholic or not. And so we're praying. So I learned as a kid that the way to get out of falling asleep praying was to, whatever you do, when you wake up and you look around and you go, oh, everybody's up, I was sleeping, just go, in Jesus' name, amen. And then sit up, and everybody, then you're trying to do this, like,
that still work for today too.
I'm awake. Yeah.
Oh, you're giving away some secrets. People might use that.
So what age were you when all of that was being experienced in your life?
That was around 9, 10, 11 in those 3 years, right in there. So, I mean, it was a huge time in my life. And I forgot the question. I got so off track, but that's where faith came from. Yeah. Then I got to see the move of God happen, and I got to see people get healed. I mean, that was amazing. And I still remember at age 11, not as a kid, not really being that involved in what was going on in the service that night, and sitting there and trembling and shaking it. And of course I'm thinking, man, am I I'm getting sick. I must be getting a cold. I must be getting the flu, all those things you would think. Then I realized, the guy that was leading it said, man, the power of God's all over you, Gene. And I still remember this day, uncontrollable,
Wow.
uncontrollable, impact of God saying, I'm here. And that's all I got. That's all I got. It wasn't some big manifesto that I got at age 11. But I knew that God was real, and that was set me on a course. And of course, that prayer meeting ended up becoming a church and all that. So, that was great. It was a great time to be alive, a great time to be in the body of Christ and see what God was doing. And in fact, what we're seeing now is a return to those times. And I think this is part of the next great awakening.
I love that, Gene. And I love that you had the opportunity to be brought up in a family that planted those seeds in you. Not everyone has that, right?
That's right. That's right.
But even though you came from a family like that and you received the Holy Spirit and you felt the presence of God and all that at a young age, there were times where you slipped away, right? And,
absolutely.
So
let me tell you, you want to know about that?
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear the down and dirty.
Yeah, we want to see. I want to see that coin.
So much for being positive.
That's right. Flip that coin over. Let's see the ugly.
Okay. Well, as anybody goes through teenage years, you start to push things aside and you go, well, I don't know, maybe. And I found beer and I thought, oh, that's cool. And so, we had a good time. But still, I was never far from God. I will say this, I never had a point where I thought God wasn't real. Okay. And maybe because of that instance I just described to you, but I knew that God was real. So I kind of got myself back, early on in my teen years, got myself back on track and went to school in 1978 at Heritage University in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was the first year at PTL had started a university. And so I was one of the first class and, really was captured by what God was doing and technology. And then, back then it was like, you can stand in television and tell people to call the phone and then it rings. That was pretty cool. That was cool to stand and watch people get saved by the hundreds. That was really a great thing. So that kind of launched into ministry and television, what I was doing and really being a part of that. And then a few years later, I traveled the world. I did everything from hideout, from coups in Africa to, like I said, in the bio, dinner with kings. I was very blessed to have these great experiences. But then I came home one day and my wife decided that it was time for a divorce. And so she divorced me. And literally within 90 days, I found myself in an apartment scratching my head, trying to figure out, what happened? How did I, it's kind of, and of course you're wanting to bargain with God and go, God, look, all I've done my whole career here is do what you said to do. But look at what happened. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, at that point, I was taking absolutely no responsibility for myself and blaming it all on God or her.
Yeah,
and that just wasn't the case. And so, I had to get to the point. And this was a key point for me. Even though things were being said that weren't true, I had to forgive her and I had to forgive myself and I had to let it go. Because there was a point where I knew if I don't let this go, this is going to define me. And I can't let a negative instance define me, whether it be happened to me or a hurt or a disease or an accident. That can't define you. You have to be able to decide that's not going to define me. That happened to me. I'm not going to deny that it happened, but let's move on. Mm-hmm. And that was a key. And moving on was to the acceptance of that.
Gene, did anybody help you through that process? Because there are some listening right now who are still kind of stuck in that place. They've been, in a sense, from their perception, victimized.
Maybe they're resentful.
And they don't understand, well, God, why would you let that happen? I've been tracking along with you and all of a sudden, wham. But this forgiveness thing is so key. So how did you get to that point? Again, did somebody help you or did you just get there on your own?
Well, I have some great friends in the body. Now, caveat here, I had worked with ministers and ministries for decades at this point, and not everybody is who they say they are.
Right.
I know that's a shock, but it really was. So I would probably had more of a wall up to go to a pastor or minister, which isn't right, is my own fault. So it probably took me, I'm sure it took me longer to overcome some of those things because I had that wall up. So I had some friends, but at the end of the day, Todd, I mean, it had to be, I had to get to, how they used to say, I came to the end of myself and emotionally and go, wait a minute, this isn't not going to work. We got to move this thing on and turn life around. And that's really what it was.
And so, you really felt like at that point, probably that, once the forgiveness piece happened and you had the friends that were pouring into you that, this isn't about me. This is about God. And so how did that shift in mindset change your actions, and which has led obviously to this new trajectory of your life? But how did that shift in mindset take you to those next steps, and what were those next steps?
Well, the first thing that happened is things got worse, Wendy. I mean, the bottom really fell out then. I had bought a failing nutritional supplement business, turned it around, and then that backfired and I got sued and I basically lost all of my investment. And 2008 hit, where I can tell you in mid-June, the week it happened, when people started to understand, well, looks like Hillary had dropped out. Obama might really be president. Churches and ministries and a lot of folks just rolled up their sidewalks, closed their doors and said, we're not going to do anything. And it was tough. It was tough. And so I had a double whammy and ended up, and that was devastating to me, to lose a business I had believed in. I really investigated a lot, was actually going to school to get my naturopath certification, because I understood of how stress and everything affected the human body. I wanted to share that with others, and that's a valiant thing. But I tell you, there was a point where I came to, when this thing had fallen apart, and it was almost, it's not that he did, but it was as if God said, I never told you to do this. God saying, I never said this is what you're supposed to do next. And I was like, oh, but it was a really cool idea, God, you got to admit, and I can do this, and I have the understanding and the business mindset. We can make this a go. But man, once I understood, man, this thing was cursed. It was not for me. I let it all go. And I had to release that. And that's a key to forgiveness. Like what you were saying, Todd, is really releasing all of that out and saying, you know what? This was my mistake. God can make this up. And listen, it was a lot of money to walk away, but I did.
But you owned it. You owned it, and that was so key.
I owned it.
You owned it.
Yeah, you have to own it and then move on.
And I remember that time, Gene.
Yeah, you did.
And you were in a place of a posture of humility. Is where you ended up being, and God could mold that humble spirit into who you are and who you always were, but more so who you are today. And I'm just grateful that you gave God the opportunity to heal your heart and move forward. So,
So I think some people, when they go through something like that, Gene, especially when you're so involved in ministry and everything, in hindsight, do you look back, and I think some of us do, and we realize that thing we went through, while we take responsibility, was also a trial by fire. That it wasn't for God to see where we're going to turn out, right? It was for us to find out how we're going to end up on the other side.
Absolutely.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think, understanding where you came from. And let me give a little further in the story. So I let all of that go and said, okay, I'm done. Then probably, I don't know, maybe as a year later, discovered I was having some issues and found out I had hepatitis C. And I'm like, is there anything else, God, you want to throw on just pile on here?
Right.
Because they were like, have you ever traveled to these countries? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? I'm like, yes, 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 and yes. And so I went. There was a moment of breaking that I had to call my parents because my kids were little at the time. And I was concerned that my ex-wife may try and take them from me if she found out I had this horrible disease. Now, understand, I had no symptoms. I had absolutely no symptoms. But every time I had, I don't know how many blood tests and trying to figure out, because I just didn't believe it was accurate. So I called my parents. When you get down to it, when it's really bad, you call mom and dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always. Yeah.
Mom and him.
Yeah, mom and him. And so when I did, I mean, they were great. And I just kind of lost it because I knew that was the bottom, finally got to the bottom of everything. And my dad said, well, you should have told us earlier and all that. But he goes, well, we're not going to have it. And he prayed. And my dad prayed on the phone. And my dad was a retired Delta Airlines jet mechanic who went into the ministry later in life as an associate pastor and used to minister at hospitals. But he was so kind to me and so understanding. Gracious. And he didn't judge me, but he prayed for me. And, it was a matter of 3 months. And I was taking, full disclosure, I was taking a very strict regimen of supplements and, wild cherry juice and all this stuff to really help my immune system. And it was gone. It was totally gone, beautiful. Totally clear.
I like what your dad said, though. He said, we're not going to have this.
That's right.
He prays again.
The power
right.
of speaking life into somebody's life, right?
No,
and especially your family, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
having that support. That's beautiful. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about goal setting, because you are a go-getter. I mean, you've already talked about a few things that you've attempted and God's like, nope, that's not for you, but you just go after it. And so let's talk a little bit about goal setting and how that works in your life. And I hear you gave it up actually, but let's just talk about why.
I figured that little comment would get you guys.
Well, so you probably set a goal to give up goal setting. Is that what I'm hearing?
Wow, I never thought of it. Yeah, maybe I did. That was crazy. Here's the thing. I have had an immense amount of great ideas and business plans, and you can walk them out. And
you're creative.
I should do this. My last one before I gave up goal setting was, there's going to be a huge amount of people that want their tattoos removed. There's going to be.
Seriously?
So I'm like, I need to set up a tattoo removal place and somehow figure that. I still think that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea because there are going to be people in about another 10, 20 years are going to go, oh, what was I thinking? And they'll want that off. Okay. That was extra. But back to goal setting, you can God and understand what I mean, Wendy, when I said that. And I said that on purpose because I know you would ask me about it, is that it is not wrong for us to have a vision board and to set goals. But what's wrong is when we don't submit them to God, number one. Amen. We think we do. I thought I was on everything. But if you really stop, most of the time our goals are selfish oriented, not God oriented.
Okay, so how do you know that they're God oriented?
Well, Wendy, you're going to have to pray about it.
Yeah,
you're going to have to pray about it, and you're going to have to be in agreement with your husband. You're going to have to all those things that you have to have. And so it's not that the goal was wrong. It's that the goal may not have been yet, or it's not the right time, but sometimes they're just wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like somebody out there is going to listen to my tattoo removal goal business
Take
thing,
it and run,
and they'll go do it. And that's great. Go do it. It's a great idea. Yeah. It was not for me to do. So I heard a speaker say, it was a motivational speaker, and she said, obviously she made such a big impression, I can't remember her name, but she was talking about give up goal settings because her point was that the universe around you will help focus you. Well, no, that was wrong. But she pricked my thinking a little bit. God has done better things for me when I wasn't trying to steer the car than when I was steering the car. So, things that have happened that have been a success have all been kind of like, I don't know, let's try this and do it. It wasn't that I thought something was going to be huge and work. It was literally, I thought this was a good idea. Maybe we'll do this for a little bit and see what happens. And that was the extent of it. But submitting him to God and being able to hold it with your hands open, no matter what God tells you to do, I have to hold my hands open and say, God, this is yours. This is your, if you want to take it, take it. But it's not about me. It's about you.
Yeah. So true. And God does know the desire of our heart. And while you may have wanted to have a tattoo removal place, I believe that you are removing tattoos, but in a different way with Flashpoint. And you're removing hardness of heart kind of tattoos on people that are dealing with, just conflicting truths. You are in the tattoo removal business. It just doesn't look like how you expected it. And so God will flip things around and give you your better and give you your best when we trust him. And so that's such a good message. So let's talk a little bit about Flashpoint and what's it all about, and where can people find you, and just how it got started.
Well, it got started back in September. Kenneth Copeland has the Victory Channel, and he said, "Hey, Gene, we need to do something, because if we're not careful, we'll lose this election." And so I wasn't willing to put anybody else on the chopping block. So I said, well, I'll do something. And I got these friends. I've got Lance Wall now, who has become a good friend, and he's got a different angle. And I've got Hank Kuhneman, who's a pastor and a prophet. It's eerily accurate. And I'm like, wouldn't that be interesting to see what those two guys thought? So it was, I came to a friend of mine, a producer, Jason, and said, hey, I got this idea. That was a Wednesday. They threw together an open, and we went on the air Thursday.
Wow.
And it was,
God was,
and we've never stopped.
Wow.
We've never, in fact, we're still using the same open that we did overnight. So it was about, and so there was something that happened, and I knew it wasn't done. Then Mario Murillo came in the picture, and Mario just really rounded it out, because now we've got pastor, prophet, teacher. We've got the whole five elements of the body. So I'm telling you, this was a God thing. I'm not this smart.
For it to happen that
really
fast.
Not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one wasn't on
exploded.
on your vision board. It wasn't a goal.
It wasn't.
Just almost sounds like God opened up a door and pushed you through it backwards.
It did. In fact, I remember telling my wife, I said, I got to do this. It's going to take a lot of extra time leading up to the election. Just need to tell you. She was like, oh yeah, you got to do this. This is too important. So I had her agreement. Good. And then we went into it, and it almost exploded. In fact, I had to look at the ratings to make sure I was reading it right, because it couldn't be that quick that things, but it really touched a nerve and really bringing the truth. And who knew that we would have in the second half of the year in 2020, not just the pandemic, but the whole thing with the election, walking into election fraud. I mean, the whole thing in Flashpoint was to only go to November 3rd and be done.
Wow.
It was really a temporary fill, but open doors massively. People are calling, wanting to be on, and they were hungry for truth. So, I remember the debate. You probably remember it, but there was a time when we had Fox News had, I won't say his name, but his initials are Chris Wallace. And where he came on there for the debate, and suddenly everybody said Fox News is not conservative anymore. Yeah. And that really turned a lot of eyes to us and really expanded everything.
Well, God is using Flashpoint, even though you had no idea what he had in mind. You've had a heart for revival, and you've studied it for years. And
right.
So I'm curious, what do you see the biggest takeaway, the biggest lesson you've learned about revival, and where does Flashpoint fit into all that?
Yeah, thank you for asking it. This is, in fact, I had a lot of minister friends say, well, Gene, you've been all about revival, and now you're about politics. Well, does that mean you're not about? I'm like, no, you don't get it. They go together.
You're right.
So what is the biggest lesson I've learned about revival? It only takes one. All you have to do is be the one. One of my favorites is the Great Hebrides Revival of 1949, the Isle of Lewis, Scotland. 2 80-year-old women. One couldn't see, and one was arthritic. And they prayed in a huge revival. Even Duncan Campbell, who was the minister of that, said, it wasn't me. They prayed it in. And God showed up in a big way. So, but if you go back to every revival, whether it was Evan Roberts in Wales, there were, or even here in America, Azusa Street, William Seymour, it always started with one person willing to push further, willing to push deeper. And I think that's where we miss it right now, is because we think we're waiting on God to magnificently show up, and we have a Pensacola outpouring all over again. And that's not how it's going to happen. I think we'll see those events, but what we're in the middle of right now is a revival. It just didn't come the way you thought it would. And because we're seeing churches turn around, look at what you're seeing. You're really seeing a revelation of the remnant. In churches now, you've got pastors that are going, well, we're going to go this way. We're going to go hard left. And then you've got the others who say, no, we're going to do what God said, and we're willing to stand up. When's the last time? Do you ever remember in our lifetimes pastors going to jail because they had church?
No.
I mean, it's unheard of. It's unheard of. So it was be the one in revival. It only takes one. All you have to do is be the one. And it doesn't necessarily mean you got to have a meeting of 500 people to be the one.
Yeah.
You be the one in your family, be the one in your neighborhood, in your city, in your county, whatever it takes. Just show Jesus to the world. And that's really it. So it comes back to what we talked about at the very beginning. It's not about me.
Yeah.
It's about God. And there's all I got to do is stand up for God.
That's so good. And I love that. Be the one. So what should we do right now to be the one, Gene, to see our nation turn around for conservative Christian values? I mean, this is a turning point. This is the time where we have to rise up and step up and be the one. So what's that step?
Yeah.
What do we do?
Well, obviously, the obvious answer is usually the right answer. And the obvious answer is we got to pray.
Yes.
And we've got to pray like we never prayed before. However, that's not the end of it. And this is where churches get off base, is they say, well, we prayed about it. And okay, well, we're done. And this is, remember, we had Donald Trump in office for 3.5 years before the church woke up and went, wait a minute, we have all these freedoms. We may lose them. We need to start doing something about it. The church was asleep. We were asleep. As a body, as a whole. So we got to pray, keep it in prayer. Then the second thing is, and I like what my friend Sammy Rodriguez says. He says, we've been waiting for God to pour out revival, and he's waiting for the church to rise up. And I think that's what you're beginning to see now, is the church rising up and standing up and saying, no, this is not what we're going to take. General Flynn stuck his finger in my chest and said, you guys don't know how big you really are. If the evangelical Christian community would come together, this nation would turn around. And it's like, wow, he's right. We're the biggest people group out there. We just have to come together and put our differences aside. You believe this, I believe that, but we have a common purpose. We've got to be able to come together and see that and start rising up. So then your next question is, well, how do you rise up? Well, first of all, what I want to do for your listeners and your viewers today, guys, is I want to give you 3 simple steps, 3 simple steps of how you do it. Number one, and I borrowed this from the military, from the Army. Number one, you have to mobilize. And that most of us have been mobilized for the last decades in the church. Mobilizes, we get ready, we get our stuff to get ready to move. Number 2 is where we're at today, and that's activate. You got to be activated. So what I'm saying today and what I'm preaching when I go out speaking and everything is I'm activating you. A lot of us just need somebody to say, okay, it's your turn, go do this. And so it's that simple. Every time I give this speech or this message, the altars are full because people are going, yeah, I just want to do something. I want to be activated. So we're activating people right now. Activation is you're called up. Remember when you play baseball, you play on the farm team, that's great. But then there's the day you're activated and you go to the pros. You're no longer going to practice back at the farm team. You're practicing with the big boys and you're on the other team. That's where we're at. We're on the pro team now. And we're not taking a knee, by the way. So then the third thing is we're deployed. And so we've got to deploy. And so that means go out. So we're activating and deploying at the same time because of the time that we're in. So when we deploy, we're going to go out there and take over. Let me give you an example of deployment. Right here in Fort Worth, at the Fort Worth Independent School District. Now get this, 4 moms, 4. Governor Abbott made a declaration and mandate saying that you can't force a mask for kids in schools. Well, the Independent School District of Fort Worth said, well, we're going to do it anyway. And so you got to wear a mask. Now, understand, this is not a mask to no mask conversation. I want you to see what happened. 4 moms sued and said, this is not accurate. And they won. 4 mothers of I would imagine elementary school kids came up and said, this is not accurate. We don't believe it, gave medical reasons. And they won. And this happened in a matter of a week. It wasn't like this long case, all these high-end lawyers. They stood up. So I'm not asking everybody to go stand up. However, while you may not need to go down to the school board, the school boards where we've lost this country, the school boards where we've missed it. When I grew up, we stood up and said the Pledge of Allegiance every morning in public school. Now, that's not even being done. In fact, there's a school north of here that actually stood up and did the gay pride Pledge of Allegiance, and you're like, wow. What? Most of us Christians are waking up going, what happened to our nation? The truth is, this was happening all along. We were asleep at the wheel. We didn't realize how this was being taken over. So we've got to stand up, be a part of your school board. You say, well, I don't feel comfortable at. Well, do something in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
There's anything you can do. Some of you, the elderly, can be a part. The great thing about a school board thing is you don't have to have a kid in school. You don't even have to have children. If you live in that county, you can go be a part of that meeting. It's going to take effort now for us to get involved. And it's just like news. You want to get the news now, you have to search high and low to get the real facts. Yeah. Because the mainstream media has been very left, very liberal, and they're not even reporting everything anymore. Right. So we have to take this on, the responsibility on ourselves to get the words out and talk about it.
It's such a good word, Gene, because I think all too often people are they want to, they love that message, Gene, but they're expecting their neighbor or someone else. Oh, they'll do it.
Expecting the Gene Baileys to do it.
Gene will do it. These four moms, they'll do it instead of us being the activators and going out and doing it. So it does. It takes all of us stepping up and rising up to that occasion. So you are working on a new book. Is that correct? It's about to be released?
The book's finished. It's actually, because I had nothing else to do, we wrote a book. Yeah,
right.
And
you don't sleep, basically.
Yeah, it was, boy, I have it takes a village to keep me going in the right direction. But yes, the book was born out of Flashpoint, obviously, and revival, because I kept getting asked the question you got to ask. And I'm like, this is what the church needs to understand. We are in a state of revival. David Barton told me several years ago that culture says, society shows it's 50 years after revival, people even notice they were in a revival. Mm. And so think about this, but here's the question for you. When we say revival, we either think of a big tent and cedar shavings and people falling out and lots of demonstrative and stuff like that. And that can be that. But what we really want is not just revival, we want reformation. Mm-hmm. We want to see it change, because if revival is just a great meeting, that's great, but there's no change. We got to have change in our society. We got to have change in our cities. Listen, America could be lost. And I think that's the part that if most believers are paying attention, wait a minute, America could be lost. Look at what's happening with, Biden's administration and what he's trying to do. This is so anti-American. It's shocking. Yet the millennials and even some of us older people are just kind of dismissing it. Oh, well, we'll get it turned around in 24 or 22. And we don't have that kind of time. We got to stand up now for the right way, and that's God's way and the Bible way. And so we got to stand up.
Yeah, and I don't think it's everyone's fault that may be going that Biden direction. It's where they're being fed the information, what they're believing to be true, right? So they're just being deceived at some point.
And let me say this: it is not a Republican and Democrat.
Right.
This is not a Republican Democrat conversation.
Right. Thank you.
That's not it. Get that out of here, because people think, oh, we're a Republican. No, forget that. That's not it. We're talking about truth and lies. So we've got to get to the truth. Because listen, there's corruption on both sides of the aisle, and it goes very deep. We got to believe and stand up for it.
Yeah, well, Gene, I'm just thinking about your whole story, and we're just really grateful that back about a dozen years or so, when you really kind of hit the floor and the bottom fell out, actually, and you made some very key decisions in your life, and that was to trust God and to own what you needed to own, and then to go forward with God leading you. Even trying some things on your own and then realizing, okay, it's not about me, it's got to be about God. And we see the fruit of that right now in your life. It is very, very encouraging. It's very inspiring. So I want you to just help that one person who's struggling and feeling like, well, all that you guys are talking about now, I mean, I got a lot of issues in my life. I mean, I know the nation's got problems in the church and all that, but I got to worry about fixing me before I talk about fixing the nation.
Maybe they're dealing with disease or a loss of a loved one or something like that. Tough.
Just give them a little encouragement that that we're all in this together in a sense.
We are all in this together. I'm glad you brought that up, Todd, because we have to understand, in the 50s, houses were smaller. You think about why were houses smaller? Because we had a bigger sense of community. I had a shovel, you had the pickaxe, I had the hammer, you had the nail. I'm being ridiculous, but we had more of a sense of community. We didn't need to amass all of these things to ourselves. We knew our neighbors. We wanted to know. Even in the 60s, there was a push to know who your neighbors were. And this is where the church has to own where they've messed up. It's not about building a bigger building or having more audience or going on TV. That's not it. And I believe what we're seeing is the beginnings of more pastors realizing that and coming out and saying, we need to be in our community. God called you in your particular area where you are to be right there. So let's take that person that's having an issue. The way to fix the nation is to fix the person. We fix each other. And how do we do that? Of course, point them to God and get the healing and restoration. But we're only going to do that with each other. We can learn things on our own. Had I had the right person speaking to my life, had I been open to the right person to speak into my life earlier, I probably would have cut down a lot of hurt and a lot of money and a lot of issues a lot faster. But I had to get there on my own. But listen, we can get there. We just need to stand out and reach out. And really, guys, think about this. How many, and I know everybody talks about, you're looking at your phone all the time and all that. And that's true. But we need to look beyond even our four walls of our family and see somebody in need. And that's really where we're going to be able to stand up. And if you're hurting and you're a believer, don't buy into the lie that you somehow messed up or you don't have enough faith or you're somehow sub-Christian because you had an issue. Right. We all have issues. We just, we need to treat transparent. We got to be transparent. In the transparency lies the key. And when you're transparent, you can ignite something in someone else to bring restoration. That's all pointing back to God. It's not about you.
Such a good word, Gene. I loved every minute of this interview. Thank you again. And you guys listening or watching, make sure you check out coming to bookstore soon, November 16th, Flashpoint of Revival. So I can't wait to get my hands on that book. Gene, just to end kind of on a light note, because this has been a pretty intense interview, which is great because so many wonderful nuggets of wisdom here. Tell us a little something fun about Gene that maybe not everyone knows about you. Maybe you have an interesting hobby or a little something. You
play the accordion.
Yeah, maybe you play the little triangle or what's something really unique about Gene that we should know?
Or that he doesn't want us to know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what do I want to share. That's the bigger thing. I don't know, Wendy. That's a tough question.
Do you have a hobby?
I like classic cars, and I have a big store. We call it our storehouse out back. That my vision is to have that full of classic cars one day, if that were to be. But I mean, that's what I really enjoy the most. The reality of having gone through what I went through, and even though I had no symptoms, and I had the Hep C. Understanding like, hey, this could be now. What's great is nowadays there's great treatment and it's just not a big deal anymore.
Right.
It's easier, much easier. But when you come face to face with a life debilitating disease, possible death, or changing your life forever, suddenly you look at the trees a little bit better. You look around, and I think that's what it is. My favorite pastime is to get up early, sit on my porch, look at the pool and the waterfall, and drink my coffee and pet my dog. I know that sounds like crazy,
that's beautiful,
that's ridiculous.
I love it.
It's not as phenomenal, but I mean that's my downtime.
Yeah,
and that's what I enjoy.
No, that's
I'll think of something really snappy later.
So he's a motorhead that loves quiet time. That's good.
Loves quiet time with the Lord. And dog is spelled God backwards. So it's all good.
Yeah. That's right. There you go.
All right, Gene, you are awesome. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Thank you.
And sharing your biggest breakthrough. So blessings and keep going strong, my friend.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care. Right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Wow, what a fun interview. We just love Gene. He's just full of wisdom and
I like the fact that, all that he's been through, I mean, years and years of ministry. And, you can get a little religious after a while.
Sure.
And Gene is not. He's real. He's
real.
He's raw. He's been humbled.
Authentic.
He acknowledges, his responsibility in how things were going for a while.
Yeah. And he
There's
actually
a lot of
went.
lessons in that.
There is. And he actually went like from behind the camera for many,
right.
many years to now like full on in front of the camera. And it's just fun to see how God uses everything. He connects all the dots and nothing's wasted.
That's
and I just think it's
exactly
so
right.
cool.
And you're never too old to learn something new.
Right.
And you're never too old to have God sort of rekindle your fires.
That's good.
And every single one of us have an opportunity to just get our own fire rekindled and then start rekindling the fire in others as well.
Yeah. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Your Biggest Breakthrough. Remember what Gene said, be the one.
Yeah.
I love that. Be the one. And hey, if you want to be the one on another side note here of giving us a 5-star rating and give us a review, that would be fantastic. We would love that. And we'll review it and share that on air next time. So thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.